Hey, welcome to episode 3 of Nobody Told Me. And today we're going to be talking about nobody told me how difficult it'd be to name your business or name your product. So I'm Mike Milan. That's Blaine Birch. How you doing today, Blaine?
I'm doing good, Mike. This is an interesting topic. I just remember how long it took for us to name our company, and before we hop into that, I just want to do the beer of the week here, and I'm curious how they named this one. But this is Aura from Great Notion in Portland, Oregon. This is actually one I haven't tried before, but just give me one sec.
Super cool picture, though. What is it?
Just delicious. I don't know. It looks like a monkey with
Is he
some
eating
mushrooms. I think he's eating mushrooms. And this is a delicious beer, though. Actually, it's a very good one. So I've had other beers from Great Notion before, but I think this is the first time I've had this Aura. So anyway, great little brewery. So what do you got going today?
Well, I tell you what, I went local, right? So if you know anything about San Antonio, this is our local brewer, Pearl Beer. And matter of fact, one of the cool things is that their original brewery is now kind of an entertainment, shopping, restaurant, hotel district
Nice.
that has a farmer's market and things like that. Plus, you can pick up Pearl just walking through. So,
Nice.
one of those type of things. So I'm going to have Pearl, which is your standard lager. It's kind of I think what you call it is a session beer, right? Are you familiar with that term?
I am, yes. Yeah. So a little bit of a lighter one. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Pearl Brewery is right there on the Riverwalk, so it's a nice, relaxing. Drink a few of them during the day, and so I'm gonna toast San Antonio today.
Nice. Yeah. I've never been, but I've heard the Riverwalk is amazing, and the closest I've been was I got to Austin and part way to San Antonio down the highway, but we never did get to San Antonio. So seems like a pretty fun state though to be in.
Well, good. Well, make sure if you get back to Austin, just make that quick little drive, stop at the house, we'll go down the Riverwalk, and we'll drink Pearl.
We'll do that. I know they have F1 races in Austin, so one of these days I'm going to make that race, I think so.
Oh, good. Right on. All right. So today I want to talk about the difficulty in naming things, right? I mean, it's not like when you have a child, you're like, oh, I want it to name Mike or I want it to name Blaine. Even if there's already another Mike Milan in your family, you don't get in trouble. Name it that way. So it's a little bit more difficult when you're talking about something as personal as your business. How about you? I mean, have you had any difficulty with that?
Well, I know when we at that time it was me, myself, and I when I came up with the idea for Dry Run, and it was a incredibly long process, and I was very conscious of not naming the company based on just something I thought was cool or whatever, but I really was trying to put my finger on what the company was going to be about and where we were going with it, even though I hadn't designed it really like the product yet or anything. It was just an idea, and we were starting to I guess we'd gone into a bit of the design process for the software, so we kind of knew a little bit about how it was going to function and structure a little bit. And it seems like a really easy answer, Dry Run. And that's, this kind of like take your business on a dry run before you do it for real kind of idea, right? Seems like it should just be so obvious, but it was a really long, hard process. And then you match in, I wanted to get, a .com that I liked, of course, which ended up dryrun.com, made it even more complicated. So.
Yeah, right. So, but it's so interesting because now I can look at, we'll say Dry Run. I'm like, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. But before there is a dry run, you're like, oh, what is it? I mean, who am I? I mean, because there's so many things you got to think about. I mean, such as, does the name really describe to other people what it is, right? Because, like Google, think about that. I mean, think about the education process they had to go through for us to even know what Google was, right?
Yep.
Were there some other names you considered?
Oh boy, a ton of them. I suspect I even have notes around from years ago of working through it. But there was a lot of things related to looking into the future, and I remember there was other run ones. There was Long Run. I'm trying to remember some of the others that I had gone through, but I had like notebooks and pages of names written down, And, I was looking through everything, looking online, reading articles, been looking at the thesaurus, but the big thing was it was all around trying to identify like what we were about. But it's more than that, because the other thing is you want something that is different, that feels different, that can stand aside from the other products, that can be memorable. And so and in my previous company as a creative agency, we did some as part of a few of the branding projects we did. We actually helped name companies and brand them. And it was just as long of a process there, because you're really trying to unpack, what is, what's unique about you? What is, and early on, you're still trying to figure that out. What are you all about? What are you delivering? How do you describe yourself to a client? To your customer? How do you, and how do you stand out in the crowd as being a little bit different, but also be part of the crowd, so that it's not just whacking off the wall and it doesn't even make sense. So it's tricky. It's a real balancing act, eh?
Yeah, I would think like, all right, so my very first company I named, I looked, it was about flowers, right? I had a hotel staffing company, but my wife at the time was really interested in flowers and landscaping. So I was looking for a flower that kind of matched up with it. I'm thinking, well, that at least makes sense to us, even though it doesn't make sense to anybody else, right? Yeah. But it became kind of a name that people recognized, was easy to say. It's called Blazing Star Staffing, right? Just Blazing Star Staffing. I think when we added staffing at the end, people got it. Oh yeah, that's a staffing.
Got it. Yeah.
Recruiting, and Blazing Star helped it was simple enough to remember. People didn't think that it was odd to say.
Yeah.
And the logo turned out really cool as well.
And the other thing, sorry, I just got something in my eye here. The other thing that I would always think about, and you pointed out, is Blazing Star Staffing is a little bit different. It's recognizable. It's about staffing, but one of the most important things is you can spell it. Like my last name, my co-founder was making fun of me online the other day on Slack and saying, here's how you remember I looked up how you spell Blaine's name. And it's like Alberta, you take the Bert, and then you take the school and you mix it with that. And it's like, he had this big thing. It was just a joke, right? On how you get to BERTSCH. And I'm like, that is not a good kind of name for any sort of business thing, right? To find you or anything. It's distinctive, but no one can remember how to spell it, right? So yeah, that's another key thing. And especially in the online world, I'm sure you've all heard you hear an ad on the radio or TV or something, and they have to, they'll have a word, but they did a weird spelling to try and get the domain name. And then they say the name and then they have to spell it for you. And you got to remember, oh yeah, you have to use a K instead of a C in this obvious C word, cat food with a K, it makes it tricky, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you're adding layers of friction in front of your customer, and you want them to be able to find you, right?
Yeah, that's so funny about like Birch and the last name, right? I mean, people even mispronounce it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I have people like, and the other thing is my first name. It's not like that weird, but like literally, I respond to, Dwayne, Blair, Brian, like the whole gamut, right? Because it's a little different. But yeah, the last name they'll misspell it. Of course, growing up when I was a kid, every new teacher every year would misspell it and mispronounce it. And I still remember the odd, growing up in Canada, the odd hockey game, and they would announce you as you go on the ice. And of course they never got it right. And just the weird, you learn pretty quick. I'm like, that's just not, it's probably not the best for when you want people to be able to spell it, pronounce it, and refer to it and all that kind of stuff.
My family is very similar, right? With Milan, it's 5 letters, it's Milan, but it's pronounced 5 different ways, right? Milan, Milan. You name it. Yeah. So I always know if somebody knows me or not.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not friends because you can't even pronounce my name.
Yeah, exactly. I think, like I see you have the Peloton shirt on, and again, like it's a great name. It symbolizes what they do. I didn't know what a Peloton was until Peloton came out. And then, I think in some of their marketing, they actually did a quick explanation of it. I'm like, Yeah, it makes sense. So let's do a little bit of an explanation, but now it makes sense and you kind of remember it, right? So it's
Well, now it's synonymous. Or you're not even associating that to a real thing anymore. That's
no,
them, right? That's
that's
the company,
them.
right? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
that's interesting because the challenge today that I don't think I ever had, we'll say in the early 2000s, is the combination of places where you have to use your name. Social media handles,
Yep.
trademarks, URLs, like you said, or domains.
Yeah.
I mean, being able to run one word across all of those is increasingly difficult. I mean, I've made up words and not been able to get it trademarked because somebody else has already got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And buying a .com, you could literally like take some alphabet soup, dump it on the floor and grab the letters, and it's probably registered by somebody. Like it's so hard to get those. So it just, again, it makes it even a more complicated, and I had to pay a fair bit to get dryrun.com, but like that's where I understood the value of it was important. It was really important for me to have something that I could build on. But even some of our social media handles are, Dry Run app, because we could get the someone had, already registered probably years before with it. So.
Well, here's an interesting story, right? It's before Blazing started staffing, I worked with a friend of mine that created a company called Hospitality Staffing Solutions, right? HSS is what we call ourselves. And when I opened an office for them in Arizona, we had a legal challenge within the first year, right, of the name. Right, we've done this. We've got 27 states, opened up with the largest hotel staffing company in the country. We go to Arizona and get a legal challenge based on the name Hospitality Staffing Solutions, because apparently there was already one in the state of Arizona in Phoenix using and going by that name. What made it worse is that they were terrible.
Oh no.
So, I'd knock on people's doors trying to get new business and go, oh yeah, you're with Hospitality Staffing Solutions. We don't want you. You've already failed here.
Yeah. Well, and that makes it interesting too, because sometimes your aspirations, like again with Dry Run, I was thinking global kind of out of the gate, but just you're talking about Arizona. I remember a few years ago there's a brewery there called McFate, and there is a brewery called McFate in another state. And of course, I imagine these guys just started a little local brewery, but they started to grow up a bit and they started to, distribute across state lines. And all of a sudden there's a conflict because they have the same name. And so I just remember, hearing about it and reading about the local, papers or whatever about them having, figuring out how they're going to rename their brewery. And, I think it may have been, I don't recall anymore, maybe named after the founder or something like that. Made perfect sense, really nice name, but it was limiting fairly quickly just because it was just kind of a common name. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little envious with these, like, the beers we're drinking today. To be able to name a brewery and a beer apparently doesn't follow any other rules on the planet, because they're the weirdest names, and especially the beers. Like, yeah, they just, because a lot of them are short runs, they can just do whatever they want, and it does make you kind of a little jealous. Like, they just come up with something they think is funny or interesting, and they do it, and they don't care. They're like, that is really freeing, because you're not going through all this work and grinding it out, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, they can just run the next cans with a different logo. They have to, right? So. The way we solved that one in Arizona was we just added of Georgia at the end, and that was okay. So we had top staffing solution of Georgia. So, but it would be cool to be able to just name something like cool, like best ever staffing solution, or something crazy like monkeys eating mushrooms staffing solution.
Yeah, exactly. It's being in Canada, or some of the. A couple of my favorite breweries are that make, literally the best beer in Canada and some of the best beer anywhere, are in Quebec, and they have really long French names for the breweries. And then someone will say, hey, what beer is that? And being Canadian, I actually did study French for a lot of years, but I'm really not very polished at it. And I can barely pronounce the brewery name. And it's just like, I feel like kind of a loser. It's like, I love this beer from, the Trois Mousquetaires, like it's just, it's just kind of funny, but it's, again, I guess they're feeling pretty free to, there isn't that sort of barrier with some markets like that. Like I guess we would battle with being online software or anything like that as a different sort of world, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So, sometimes naming is easier than others. Like the first bar I ever had was on Church Street, and I bought it from another guy, and his last name was Roughgar. And he named the bar Rough Cars. Well, I mean, when I buy it, I don't want that guy's name.
Exactly.
Name on my bar. So I had to rename it, right? So I rename it, and it's on Church Street. So I just named it Church Street. Church Street Bar and Grill, right? And it seemed to work. Matter of fact, it's still named that today. So that tells me that it was a good thing that even though it's been through one or two owners since me, they kept the name in place.
Yeah.
We had kind of a cool logo on the back, First of all, it was called Church Street because there's like 5 churches on that 4-block area.
Yeah.
But our logo on the back was, Church Street every day but Sunday. Right? meaning we weren't open on Sunday, meaning you should go to church, right? every day but Sunday. So we were trying not to offend, but also be kind of a little bit of edgy and a little bit fun.
Yeah. That's, and I think it's a clever way to name it because it's catchy, but everyone kind of knows where it is. And there, I just heard there was an open bay and that where a restaurant had failed, basically at the start of the pandemic, close to our place in Arizona. And I just saw in a note we got a little while ago that there's a new business going in there, and they named it Thompson 105. Really cool sounding name. Yeah, but it's on Thompson Peak and 105th Street, and you're like, that's just
so
like
easy.
you can. It's so easy. It sounds really good, but people know, where it is because it's not like right there, but it's close. It's close enough that they can kind of go, yeah, I know where it is, right? And that's that's again for a local business, not like an online one or whatever. Just really clever because you hear the name and it's just like, yeah, I kind of know where it is, right? You can find it.
Yeah. Well, we got a new brewery just up the road. They have a tap room. I don't think maybe you can get a growler or something like that. Maybe we'll bring it in, but they called it the Screaming Goat.
Nice.
It's one of those things that you remember pretty easily. It's an easy name. Screaming Goat, you can hear and listen to a goat bleat, I guess, and understand it. But naming rights and stuff like that are really, really difficult. So when I was with Finnegraph, we built a competitor of yours, right? And that actually, for almost a year, we debated the name on that product, and the product, the name ended up being Cash Flow Tool, and I think I was the only one that liked the name. Everyone else had, other things that they thought it should be. They thought it was too corny. I'm like, wait a second, creditkarma.com.
It's clear.
What's the one where you buy your pet medicine or, just, I said, why not just tell people what we are? We're a cash flow tool. Just tell them cashflowtool.com.
And you're good to go. Yeah.
But we were lucky that was available, right? I mean, it just happened to be available. Nobody had picked up cash flow tool. If you wanted cashflow.com, well, that's about $1 million, right? I think.
Yeah. And you know what? It's not actually as good of a domain name because if you have cashflow.com, what is it? Is it a bank?
Exactly
is it
right.
Like you have no idea? Cashflow tool. It's the tool for like it is just actually a lot more distinctive and a lot better name and a lot more descriptive. So it's a great win for a tool like that.
Yeah, I think people were just, like it was too simple, right? But if you look at Occam's razor, sometimes the best answer is the most simplest. So the right answer is the most simplest. So, but even then, it would pop up as a debate inside the leadership room, I bet every quarter, right? About changing the name. I'm like, yeah, we've got way too much invested now. Plus it's just easy. Cashflowtool.com. I mean, people get it. They know it. Matter of fact, when you see, and you probably have it now, when you see other companies starting to advertise on your name, in a search, you've done something right.
Done something right. Yeah, exactly.
You've done
Yeah.
something right.
Yeah. And you know what? That's the other interesting thing is changing a name midstream. You see that more often than I would think. And, I suppose sometimes if there is like trademark issues or things like that, that sort of can be a reason. But sometimes I kind of think businesses outthink themselves. They've got a name that, they think it just makes sense, but they've built up equity. People know who they are. They start to understand it, and then they randomly change it. Sometimes it feels like on a whim, and it feels like a really dangerous thing to do because you just lose all of that brand equity you've built for years.
What's funny is that when we were in beta, we actually called Cashflow Tool by another name, and it just wasn't a great name, but we called it Flight, right? Flight by Finograph. And that's what we thought. We'd help your business take flight, and I had this marketing campaign all around it. But it just gets lost, right? If you search for Flight, you're not going to find the Cashflow Tool, right? You search for Cashflow Tool, you're going to get, Cashflow Tool. So we had to change it just because we were going to get lost and buried in search land.
Yeah, and that's so important these days too. And that's again, it comes down to fitting the mold but also being distinctive and standing out. And it's this little balancing act. And yeah, it's tricky. And like we talked, I've never named kind of this highly local company, like a retail sort of location, that very different approach to that, which I find really interesting compared to kind of the online one that we've had to both deal with. So,
yeah. Well, and the hardest thing that I've had recently is trying to connect the product to what it is, then get the domain, and then get the Instagram, the Facebook, the LinkedIn, and try to keep it consistent where it could be found pretty easily, right? And more often than not, you'll get like 3 of the 5.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah.
It even happened with Cashflow Mike, right? I'm like, who out there is going to have Cashflow Mike? Yeah, right. So I'm just trying to get the Instagram, and there's already a Cashflow Mike. I'm like, who's out there got Cashflow Mike? So I go to his page. Yeah. It's a teenager that's really hopped up on his tennis shoes, right? He likes his tennis shoes and things like that. I'm like, that's not Cashflow Mike. so then I have to put the Cashflow Mike, and then I get kind of a weird combination of things that are going on. And
you're never going to get them all. And I guess even today, there's I guess the argument that some businesses, the social media handle might be more important than the domain name on the web, just because if that's where they're found and that's where all of the activity happens, it isn't like that for us at all. So, but I can imagine with some businesses that they may actually have to lead with Instagram. I've never sort of thought about that before, but it definitely could happen, right?
Yeah. Hey, have you seen the show on, I think it's Netflix or Prime? I can't remember which one it is. It's one of those two, Amazon Prime or Netflix, about the story of Dublin Dr Pepper.
No.
All right. So go watch this thing because it's a cautionary tale. I actually did a podcast on it about 2 years ago, but it was back, we'll say the 40s, maybe 50s, 40s, 50s, somewhere in there. Dr. Pepper had become more known globally, right? Even though it was from Texas and Waco and those type of things, they changed the formula as they grew, right? For cost or whatever it was, but they changed the formula. But they allowed this one distributor in Dublin, Texas, to retain the old formula and promote the old formula and sell it, as long as they did so in like a 1 or 2 county area. I don't think it was a very big area, maybe 40 square miles.
Yeah.
Well, it caught on. Right? People were driving in to get this stuff because it was the original. I think it had to do with the sugar that was used. Maybe it was a cane sugar versus whatever sweetener they do now, change the flavor characteristics. So people were going in, but there's a book called The World is Flat, which means, meaning that economies can kind of go anywhere now. You can sell dry run in India. So what they were doing was they were starting to take orders and ship out this Dublin Dr Pepper. in violation of their original agreement back in the
Yeah.
50s of you can sell that formula as long as you do it in a closed contained thing. So, but think about this. That was their whole niche, was being able to, they had festivals around it and fairs and things like that. People would drive in, buy cases of this stuff, take it home. I think there was even a couple places like in Austin, I think I saw in the movie, where they would drive up there and pick this stuff up and bring it back and sell it inside their store.
Yeah.
Just because it was great, right? But they had to go there to get it. As soon as they start shipping it out, they're violating and breaking it. Dr. Pepper corporate now goes in, slams them, shuts the place down, ruins their whole business, right? So it's kind of, a cautionary tale about trademarking and naming, because they had named it Dublin Dr Pepper, but still use the logos and things like that.
Yeah. I'll have to track that one down. That's interesting. Well, and it sounds like you'd wish for a happier ending, I suppose, for the Dublin guys, but unfortunately, it doesn't sound like it was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, with trademarks, right? When you pick your name, they're going to look for things that sounds like or looks like or those type of things. And if there's a company out there that's really protective of a word or a similar word, even if it's not in the same industry, all they really have to do is file an objection, and it kind of throws off your whole plan, right?
Yeah.
What I learned recently is, somebody can file an objection to your trademark, and then it puts it into this 90-day waiting period for them to not even file an objection, to just ask for more time. They can continue to do that for like 18 months or 24 months. So think about that, picking a name, but then not being able to market it or distribute it or put it out in the public for 24 months. If you're a small business, that's a killer.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
do it. Yeah.
So and we had even done, in that case, we'd even did a couple of searches with a lawyer, but and it said it was low risk. Well, it's not low risk when somebody just files.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It only takes one person to say, I want to look into this further. And it throws your whole timeline off everything. So, I mean, that's kind of the difficulty of it. So, hey, have you ever made a naming, bad choice, bad decision, and said, oh, we shouldn't have done that?
That's not something that like sort of comes to mind. Like I think maybe like there's things within our tool that we've sort of renamed or relabeled because we just want to make it more clear but not on the company name level that I recall ever doing. But like I said, it's an exhaustive process. So you hope by the time we've gone through it, well, for some people, like for us, it's always been, everything we've done has been this exhaustive process. I think some people just kind of name something on a whim, and that could probably lead to some regret later because get boxed in the corner somehow, right?
Yeah. Well, all right. So one that I always debated whether or not it was good or bad. I got involved with an herbal supplement company with a good friend of mine, and he had this. Well, it's an herbal supplement, but think about it like Gatorade in a pill, right? It was designed to give you, to refresh you, to recharge you, to those, replenish, everything that maybe had been exerted. And we called it Recover, right? Recover, like recovery. But while using it, we found out that it also had some anti-hangover abilities. So, we started in the bars, passing it out at the bars. And so we kind of changed the tagline to recover, late night recovery, and tried to pull that into, kind of an anti-hangover pill, where I thought maybe we should have been more direct. Like, this is what it is. It's not really Gatorade in a pill. We're selling a hangover pill. I mean, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, the thing is, you'd have the insight because you were actually in there talking with people and passing it out and everything, right? Because it sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me, but that I think is where the rubber hits the road is when you're talking with your customers and talking with your clients and finding out, is there some confusion there? Is there some miscommunication potentially? But it sounds right to me. I don't know. What was your experience with it?
Well, I think it was fine, right? I mean, I think it was just a personal gut feeling, like, are we missing it? You know, do people not get it? Do they think it's one thing when it's another? Um, and you know, there's an argument to be made. You know, do any vitamins or pills work? You know, when it comes
Yeah.
down to the terrible supplements, but this one actually did, and it had good enough branding and packaging. My buddy did a really nice job on it, so much so that our first contract was in 119 Walgreens. Right, it was the
Wow.
first people to buy it was Walgreens. You know, because I'm like, if we're gonna go hunt for places to sell, I'm not gonna hawk, you know, pills door to door from every convenience store in the world. Let's go for the big
Yeah.
retailers and see what we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, and we did radio, we did TV. I think people got it. It was just always my thing was, does it really say it well enough? You know, and believe it or not, we almost got on Shark Tank, but I think there was a mismatch on how do I display, because I got to the final cut. We even sent them stuff and things like that. We did videos for them, and we had trouble connecting the effects of a pill on TV. I think you can do it now, but we couldn't do it then.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
No, we weren't smart enough. I'll tell you that.
yeah. It sounds honestly like a really good name to me. It's very clear and like it seems like it would be good. But the one thing that I think you brought up that's interesting is you got into Walgreens with it. And that's really key. And then you start thinking about, well, what if you had named it something like would have Walgreens been okay with it if you had called it like, you know, the hangover pill or like something around hangover? Or would they sort of go, I'm not sure if we want to touch that. Like I'd have no idea.
Yeah, right.
But it does bring up the possibility that like how you name your product, especially, boy, your distributors, you probably have to consider that right from the start. What would make it attractive to them on a number of levels, something they believe they can sell, something they want to carry in their store. Like, you know, that brings up a whole other area there.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't want to alienate customers and things like that. No. It's just like, you know, I mean, I've heard of places not carrying items just because of the name.
Yeah.
Right. Or because of the type of item it is in connection with the name.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of like prophylactics and, you know, places like school bookstores, you know, on college campuses. Yeah. I mean, there's a debate that I've heard where do we carry them or not carry them, you know, based on the type of product and the audience. So,
yeah.
Have you ever heard like the bad naming story about like the Chevy Nova?
No.
And the problem that they had?
No,
you're familiar with the car, right?
I know the car.
Kind of almost a muscle car in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
They had trouble in Mexico. Selling it because nobody would buy it there because of the name, right? Cool car, great car, but Nova means don't go.
Oh, really?
Doesn't go, Nova. Doesn't go in Spanish. So nobody would buy it for fear that the car wouldn't run.
I remember, like, I don't remember any of the specific specifics anymore, but I do remember seeing articles about companies like where it's especially product names that just didn't translate in other countries. And it could just basically be a full stop on sales, just like a Nova like that. And again, something that you kind of have to think about, especially if you're going in somewhere to translate, to be able to translate your name, right? Like, I'll be honest with you, there's 170 countries on the planet. I have no idea what dry run means in like the vast majority of them, right? Like there could be somewhere it's like that does not work. I would have no idea because there's a point where there's a limit on what you can do early on and really understand, I think. But
yeah, that one seems pretty safe. I don't know. It feels safe. Might not be. It feels
well when you're talking about languages, like I have no idea, right? Like I just have never even really thought about it till now, but you kind of wonder, it could be an awful name in some other language.
Yeah,
I'd have no idea, right? But I suppose that is like, you know, what they should have done with the Chevy Nova would be the same with probably you go into a country that's probably worth checking out first. And if you have to rename it for that country, you rename it for that country. But you should know going in, not after, a year of sales data and going, what's going on here?
Well, yeah. Think about it though. I can imagine the guys at Chevy going Nova. I mean, we're talking about interstellar stuff.
Yeah.
Not even making the simplest connection of it doesn't go.
And how much do you want to bet the first person to hear it down there said, that's not a good name down here? And it was probably just, don't worry about it, we're Chevy, right? Like I'm
That's
totally
right.
guessing, but I wouldn't be surprised that, that should not be a complete surprise to a company of that size. So they just chickened out, right? Like,
all right. So speaking of names, I mean, think about it. There's an NFL pro football team, Washington right now, that is having a naming challenge.
mm-hmm.
How do you take 30, 40 years of history or whatever it's been, maybe 50 years of history,
Yeah.
and convert it to a new name? And what's the new name that's not offensive, that doesn't, that still symbolizes everything that you want it to be?
This was a great topic to bring up because they did that locally with our local football team this year.
Really?
So our local football team for the last, I don't even know, the CFL is a very old league. I believe it's older than the NFL. So, and Edmonton is at a team. I couldn't tell you how long. I think it's got to be over 50 years, I would guess. Well over 50 years, maybe, for the team. But originally, and through all growing up and everything until just a couple of years ago, it was called the Edmonton Eskimos.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided that's not, realize it's not a name that is acceptable everywhere. And they thought, this is not, we want to alienate fans and all the things that Washington went through. And so they decided they were going to rename the team. And so it was interesting because you kind of got to see from further away what they did. And so they renamed it the Edmonton Football Club. But of course, no one was playing football in Canada last year. They actually iced the season. And then they started to hold, I think it was contests, to get feedback on names, right?
Yeah.
And so then they did the surveys. And so everyone in the city could, make comments about these names. And they, I'm trying to remember some of the ones they had, like they had the Edmonton Energy, because, Edmonton Oilers, like it's a province based on oil, right? And they had Edmonton elk hounds, Edmonton elk, Edmonton, some of them are just not great. And they've been sort of referred to as the double E for so long that I think they wanted another E name, because they sort of had that other brand aspect, kind of cornered them a little bit. And so in the end, like just a couple of months ago, they renamed the team the Elks.
Okay.
And, I guess there's elk in Alberta. It's not, it's very probably non-offensive. The only thing that now I'm getting used to, but the only thing that drove me nuts is they added the S on the end. And so when they announced it, they were calling it, and even in the surveys and everything, they said Edmonton Elk. That was what the name was. And then they announced it and they said Edmonton Elks.
Oh, wow.
There's elk around here. No one adds an S. And so then they came on the radio, and one of the president or whatever, and he said, okay, well, we debated this for weeks. And he thought it was more inclusive if you had the S on. I don't know why.
Yeah, but it's not grammatically correct, right?
Well, then he had to explain. He goes, but we went to we talked with Oxford Dictionary people, and we went to a linguist at the university, and I guess you can actually technically add the S and it is acceptable.
Wow.
The fact that nobody actually uses the S seemed to have gone over their head. So it sounds completely wrong. And just like you, like, that's not even right. Yeah, well, except that. So I just thought it was so funny that here's a business that has to come out and they announce their name, and the first thing they have to do is announce the name and then explain that they went to the Oxford Dictionary and talked with a linguist to make sure that it actually was right. And I thought, that is not a really exciting way to name your name when you're trying to justify it out of the gate. I thought it was so bonkers. And I had trouble wrapping my head around it being more inclusive, because I'm like, people know elk is also a plural word, right? Like, it's like the mooses. It's just weird. So it was, but I'm getting used to it, because now, that was the other thing, is I found it so annoying at the start, but now that I'm hearing it, on the radio every day, and they're talking about, the Elks training camp and this and that. And it's funny because you hear it enough and you get used to it. And all of a sudden I'm like I don't even think about it anymore. So it's transitioned over just a few weeks here, which is really kind of a neat thing.
Well, and Seattle has a new hockey team. Right?
Yes, the Kraken.
The Kraken. So I mean, what's the plural for Kraken? Krakens?
Krakens. Yeah. Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask the Oxford Dictionary. But I do find that like it's a pretty cool name and quite a cool logo, especially when you think of the Mighty Ducks, which are now just the Ducks, I think. But
exactly. I thought it was kind of cool too, right? And totally different. Just unexpected. And unexpected. So.
And just on a little bit off topic, it's quite hilarious up here being in Canada, because we're in June in Canada, and the conversation is on the expansion draft for the Kraken. And I saw an article the other day where this writer was like, we literally apparently have to fire the GM on the rumor that he might not protect a defenseman that barely plays for us anyway. It's so funny how it gets so serious. Like, this is just like the expansion draft in a few weeks, and like that's all they're talking about. It's quite funny actually.
How big is Edmonton?
It's about 1 million. Metros, I think 1.2, something like that. So it's not big. This is kind of your average size city, not average in Canada, but like I think there's a lot of American cities that would be 1 million plus. So.
Oh, I think it's about the same as like San Antonio, right?
Okay.
Maybe a little bit bigger, but San Antonio is considered, one of the top seven, cities in population wise. Now that doesn't include like when you start talking about metropolitan areas. We're just talking about cities.
About the city,
yeah. And San Antonio doesn't have a lot of suburbs around it. Like some, like a Chicago, like even a Seattle or Los Angeles. It's just an expansive city. I mean, miles and miles across.
Yeah, like the Phoenix metro area, same sort of thing. Like Phoenix itself, I think I'm not even sure. I think it's around 1 million people, but the metro area is like 4 times that size. Here, the vast majority is in Edmonton, but there is, a decent population. It's kind of the metro area as well. But I guess big enough to have, some pro teams, pro hockey team, pro football, and that. So that's nice to have. So.
Yeah. All right. So what did we learn today? Right. Let's kind of sum this up. What did we learn? I still think it's difficult to do it. Some of the advice I would give people is to try to choose a name that helps people connect with what you do. Right. Try, because it gives you that one. It's less friction, I think is the word used.
Exactly. Yeah.
Less friction, but then you have to be able to find a way to make it harmonize across multiple platforms, like social media, like your URL, like any of the other materials that you're using out there. So search engine, those type of things. So I mean, what are you thinking?
The only thing I'll sort of build on there is because you see it, especially with people naming their first business, it's not about you at all. It is about your customer. That is. And that can be, sometimes a bit of an uncomfortable thing. It's like, it's my business. I have to project. It's not about you. It's about your customer, and communicating with them, communicating your services, communicating your values. Like that's so important that it's focused exclusively on them. It'll really help reduce that friction, and just it'll make your business give it a better chance of success.
Great. Hey, that is Blaine Birch, the author of Pandemic Cash Flow. I'm Mike Mylan. I've got a couple books out there on Amazon as well. Don't Be a Dumb Business Owner is one of them. And hey, this is Nobody Told Me, right? Nobody told me. So Blaine, good to see you again this week, and looking forward to next week.
Absolutely, Mike. This was a fun topic to chat about. Looking forward to the next one.